r/NoSleep. Posted by u/GoNavy27. My city has been cut off from the world and overrun with monsters. I have a set of rules to stay alive. Part 1. You've all seen Zombieland. You probably know about the list of rules Columbus follows religiously to stay alive. I always thought that was a dumb survival tactic made up by the writers to add some humor and structure to the movie, because in what world would rules be enough to save you if zombies took over? I'm more of a do the stupid thing first, think it through later and realize it was stupid kind of guy anyway. Then things went to shit, and I realized that a list of rules might actually save my life. No, there hasn't been a zombie apocalypse that you managed to miss amidst all the other insane headlines of this year, though would it really surprise you if there was? Here's the deal, my city has been overrun with, well, I don't know what they technically are, but I've been calling them Caleb's, honestly, after this dude I hated in high school. There's not really a great way to describe them, but if you start with a human, then peel all the skin off, then let what's left rot for a while, then lengthen its arms, then rip out its eyes, leaving big-ass dark empty sockets in their wake, you'll be in the right ballpark. They're not all, either, they're only the tip of the iceberg. We also have Sandras, Dylans, and Ashleys, and each are their own breed of terrible. No, I don't know where any of them came from, no, I won't tell you what city it is, and yes, I hated a lot of people in high school. This is what I do know, the city has been cut off from the outside world. The day all the monsters showed up was the same day a giant bubble settled over us. Which is great for the rest of you, since the monsters can't spread beyond city limits. But let me tell you, it sucks for those of us unlucky enough to be in the danger zone. The monsters are all trapped here, but so are we. And that's probably why you haven't heard anything about what's going on. No one can get in or even see in, the bubble is foggy, like frosted glass. Pounding on it, driving a truck into it, screaming at it, all that does jack shit. Trust me, I tried. Phones and internet still work, barely. Think 1 bar of cell service, and internet speed you'd find in a hotel. A really shitty hotel. I'm trying to share this, and I'm hoping it goes through, but I have no idea if it will work. Why me, you ask? Why haven't others managed to call or post or email? Well, you're in luck, because that's another thing I do know, I'm one of the only people left. Maybe the only one. Everyone else is long dead. Most didn't survive the initial attacks. I'm pretty sure there were, like, a couple hundred people alive in the city only a few days after this all started. A week later, probably 100. And now, months later, I might be the last of all. I haven't seen another human in 27 days. I've been counting. And man, I didn't think I'd miss those suckers, because humans are usually awful. I mean, have you met high schoolers? There's a reason it's accurate to name man-eating monsters after them. But I'm starting to really miss them. My friends and family most of all, but even like, my teachers and bus driver. Not Caleb, though. Fuck Caleb. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about Caleb. I wanted to distract myself from the chaos and misery that is my life, and to share my rules with you. Maybe my rules will become popular, and if I ever get out of here, they'll make a Zombieland type movie about me. That's living the dream. Or maybe something similar is happening somewhere else out there, and my rules might actually help anyone trying to survive in another monster hellscape. That'd be cool too, I guess. So that brings me to rule number 2. Yes, I'm starting with number 2. Don't ask. There is a rule number 1, but I'm not ready to talk about that yet. That would mean I'd have to talk about the day this all started, and I've been actively fleeing from that post-traumatic stress for 9 months now. I'm not about to risk my fragile mental stability for strangers on the internet. Rule number 2, always carry a laser pointer. Preferably red, but green will work too. That probably sounds dumb to you. I don't give a shit. It's saved my life more times than any other single thing has, because of the effect it has on Caleb's. I don't remember if I've said this yet or not, so to be safe, let me say it here, fuck Caleb. That kid was the worst. The Calebs running around now are also the worst, but to be honest, I think I'd take them over original Caleb. He's dead now, if you were wondering. Like everyone else in this hellhole. Back to the laser pointer. I found about their usefulness the day after this all started, aka the day after I saw my parents torn apart in front of me, aka the day after the blood of my friends painted the walls of the high school, aka the day after I made rule number 1. I digress. I was in a pet store down the street from my neighborhood. Don't ask why, I just was. It seemed like a good place to hide for the night after I fled from my house. It was a small local store, just supplies, no animals for sale. but I'd come here a lot as a kid to visit the shop cat, Mr. Bailey. We never had pets, so Mr. Bailey was like my surrogate pet, I guess. He was a brown tabby with a fluffy tail, and we spent many afternoons playing on the floor of the shop. I didn't expect him to still be there. The owner was in his car out front, dead, and not in a pretty way either. Head torn off, blood all over the windows and pavement. He'd been trying to flee, probably. But the store was untouched, so I cautiously went in and settled down in the back, using several dog beds to create something of a nest for myself to sleep in. And as soon as I sat down, Mr. Bailey was there, purring and rubbing on my legs. He was still friendly as ever. I wondered if he remembered me. It had been a while since I'd stepped foot here, but here he was, greeting me as an old friend. I smiled for the first time since all hell had broken loose and stroked his head. He slept curled up beside me as I fitfully tried to get some rest. It wasn't much use. I probably slept 2 hours, tops. But what could I expect after what I'd seen that day? I couldn't stop picturing the horrible deaths, and every time I shut my eyes, any noise sounded like one of those ugly motherfuckers I'd decided to call Caleb's. We made it to morning somehow. Mr. Bailey's company helped. Once it was light enough to see around the store without turning on any lights, I got up and began to move around. I used the little one-person bathroom in the back and ate the owner's lunch from yesterday, which he'd left in the mini fridge behind the checkout counter. I knew it would be there. He used to eat at the counter while he watched me play with Mr. Bailey. What a fucked up world it was that I was eating his food now, in full view of his decimated body outside in his car. Suddenly I heard a horrific half growl, half screech. I can't describe it, but trust me when I say it makes you want to go deaf. Unfortunately, I knew that noise. It was a Caleb. And it had found me. I saw it sprinting on all fours, those long arms propelling it forward, across the parking lot, right for me. Fuck, 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 I shouted to no one, running towards the back of the store. I was barely in the cat food aisle when the Caleb flung itself through the front window, shattering it and sending shards flying. I ducked, but a piece of glass still managed to nick my cheek, and blood dripped down my face. The only weapon I had was a kitchen knife, and I didn't trust my chances in one-on-one combat. I can play basketball, but I've never fought someone in my life. And I'm also a raging idiot. Not the kind of person to have good instincts in a combat scenario. Case in point, even with only this knife, I stood up and said, "Hey, fucker, over here." As soon as it turned to look at me with those gaping black eye holes, I gave it the finger. Did it know what that stood for? No idea, but I figured it couldn't hurt. It made that awful noise again and came after me. That's when I realized I had absolutely zero plans besides get its attention like a dumbass. Panicking, I sprinted into the next aisle, which was full of dog food. Not helpful. I started to run into the next aisle but made the mistake of turning to look how close it was, and I went crashing into a display of cat toys. Feathers, catnip, things with little jingly bells all came down with me. And as I struggled to untangle myself from strings and feathers, the Caleb came around the corner, its mouth hanging open to reveal rows and rows of sharp, jagged teeth. It was moving slowly now, standing on its back 2 legs, taking its time. I did not want to die in a bed of catnip-filled mice. I maneuvered to get my arm beneath me, trying to get to the knife hanging from my belt, but I couldn't reach it. I struggled more as the Caleb stepped closer, and finally my hand closed around something. Not the knife, but something small and slender, some kind of tube. I pulled it out. A laser pointer. Well, shit, I said out loud. But hey, it was worth a shot. Maybe I could shine it enough to attract Mr. Bailey's attention and get him over here, at least. He might attack an unfamiliar, weird-smelling monster. My goal was to shine it on the wall, make it visible to the cat, assuming he was still in here somewhere. But my arm was still partially caught up in string, and as I couldn't maneuver my hand or the laser exactly as I wanted. When I pressed the button, the glaring red beam didn't go past the Caleb to the wall, but instead aimed directly at that dark hole where an eye should be. And damn, am I lucky it did. Because the Caleb screamed, a real inhuman kind of scream, the kind that makes your blood run cold. It clawed at its own face and stumbled backward. I did my best to keep the laser trained on its eyes as it moved. I wasn't sure what was happening here, but by God, it was working, so I wasn't about to stop. The Caleb was still moving backwards, now into the aisle housing cat litter. I shoved myself up with my non-laser hand, still entangled in cat toys, and lurched forward, trying my best not to trip over feathers while keeping my gaze on the Caleb, so that I could keep the laser aimed at an eye hole. Smoke was coming out of the dark socket now. The laser was burning it. And still it stumbled backwards, screaming, until it finally fell to its knees. Standing now next to rows of cat litter, I finally shut the laser off, and before it could recover, I said, "Hey, ugly, catch," and picked up a 28-pound box of litter, heaving it towards the monster with all the upper body strength I could muster. It hit the Caleb square in the chest, and it collapsed backward, the litter pinning it to the ground as it still screamed and scratched at its burning eye socket. I started to walk forward, breathing heavily from the toss, when Mr. Bailey came out of nowhere. Screeching a battle cry, he flung himself on the monster and began clawing its other eye socket. The Caleb tried to throw him off, but between the smoking eye and the heavy weight on its chest, its struggles were getting weaker. Mr. Bailey, bless his heart, hissed up a storm and scratched the living hell out of the other eye before neatly jumping off and trotting over to me, rubbing on my leg happily. "Good boy," I said, scratching his back. And then I stepped over to the Caleb, which had smoke billowing from one eye socket and some kind of deep purple liquid, its blood oozing out the other, the one Mr. Bailey had gone to town on. That cat was my hero. I got down on my knees beside its head, bells jingling as the toys hanging from me followed. I held up the laser pointer. "Thanks for the tip, buddy. Good to know." And now, finally able to reach my belt, I grabbed the kitchen knife and stabbed it. First in its damaged eyes, leading to a resurgence of screams, and then straight into its neck. I didn't know if it had a heart, but the neck seemed a pretty good bet. And it was. I sliced through the neck, purple liquid sprayed out, and that was that. A bit of twitching later, and it was dead. I breathed a sigh of relief and went back over to pet Mr. Bailey, finally untangling myself from the cat toys as I did so. He jumped up and hooked a feather with his claws happily as it fell towards the floor. "Great work, Mr. B," I said. "It's only 9 a.m., but what a day we've had, huh?" He looked at me with the feather in his mouth and purred. "I took all the laser pointers in that store when I left. There were 8 in stock. I'm down to 4. And let me tell you, they are, quite literally, a lifesaver. Not a lot of things weaken Calebs enough that you can get close and hurt them, but laser pointers do. I've found that red works best, green is slightly less effective, but still gets the job done if you're in a pinch. Which is why rule number 2 exists, and why it's so important. Always carry a laser pointer. Ah, but I'm forgetting the addendum to the rule. Rule number 2, Part B, maximum damage occurs when combined with a cat. After all, I may be the last human, but I didn't say anything about cats. Mr. Bailey is sitting on my lap purring as I type this. Mr. B, or the Caleb Killer as he is affectionately known to his fans, me, is a force to be reckoned with. Also, he's the cutest damn thing in the whole world. Which is why rule number 2, especially Part B, is one of my favorites.